Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We've got some exciting news for Raiders fans. At the NFL Combine, Jalen Milroe made headlines. His hands actually grew by more than half an inch since the Senior Bowl last month. That might not sound like a big deal, but in football, bigger hands can mean better control of the ball. In fact, his hands are now larger than Cam Ward's and Will Howard's, which is definitely catching the attention of scouts. The Raiders seem to be very impressed with both Jalen Milroe and Quinn Ewers. This could mean they're not planning to draft a quarterback with their sixth overall pick. Instead, they were seriously chasing Matthew Stafford in the trade market, but that option disappeared when he decided to stay with the Los Angeles Rams. Now, new names are swirling around in Raiders rumors. Sam Darnold, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, and even Aaron Rodgers have all been mentioned as potential targets. One interesting idea: the Raiders could sign Aaron Rodgers on a one-year deal while drafting Jalen Milroe in the third round. Milroe could then learn behind Rodgers for a season, setting him up for success in the future. Could this be the best move for the Raiders? Let's see how things unfold. I have to say, I really like this idea. But before we dive deeper into Jalen Milroe and all the latest Raiders news from the Combine, we have to talk about Matthew Stafford. As you know, the Raiders were seriously looking into trading for Stafford. But just yesterday, we got the official news. He's staying with the Los Angeles Rams. That puts the Raiders back at square one in their search for a quarterback. Now, the headlines are buzzing with names like Russell Wilson and Sam Darnold. Wilson in particular is an interesting possibility because of his connection with Pete Carroll, the new head coach of the Raiders. Carroll and Wilson have a long history together. They even won a Super Bowl in Seattle. On the other hand, Sam Darnold is widely considered the best free agent quarterback available this offseason. And here's where things get really interesting. We are just 12 days away from the start of free agency, with the legal tampering period kicking off in 10 days. That means big moves are coming soon. As for the draft, I'm a huge fan of both Jalen Milroe and Will Howard. If the Raiders bring in a veteran quarterback and draft one of these young talents in the third or fourth round, they could be setting themselves up for long-term success. Let's see how this plays out. I'm really excited about this quarterback class. I'd love to see the Raiders land their quarterback of the future, whether it's Dylan Gabriel, Jackson Dart, Cam Ward, or Shedeur Sanders. The team needs a long-term solution at the position. But when it comes to Russell Wilson, I'm not sold. Sure, he completed 63.7% of his passes for around 2,500 yards, 16 touchdowns, and just 5 interceptions in 11 regular season games with the Pittsburgh Steelers. But if you watched Pittsburgh's final stretch of the season, including the playoffs, it was rough. I don't think the Raiders should take that risk. Now, I will say, Wilson does have one advantage: mobility. I picked this up from Sanj over at the Las Vegas News Network. Shout out to him. Mobility is valuable, but even with that, I don't think Wilson is the answer. The Raiders struggled in the red zone last season, whether it was Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, or Desmond Ritter under center. None of them could consistently get the job done, and I don't believe Wilson would be a major upgrade in that area. On the other hand, I do like Sam Darnold. He's 27, coming off a solid season, and could be a good option. If the Raiders go that route, it could be an interesting move. Either way, the team has some big decisions to make. Let's see what happens. Now let's talk about Jalen Milroe. As I mentioned earlier, his hand size has increased significantly since the Senior Bowl, which is pretty crazy. At the Senior Bowl, his hands measured 8 3/4 inches, but just a month later at the NFL Combine, they measured 9 3/8 inches. That's a major jump. Why does this matter? Well, in the NFL, there's the belief that quarterbacks with hands smaller than 9 inches may struggle with ball control, especially in bad weather. A month ago, Milroe was below that mark, but now he's over it. In fact, his hands are now bigger than both Cam Ward's, who's projected to go first overall, and Will Howard's. That's a pretty interesting development. According to The Athletic's Vic Tafur and Tashin Reed, both Alabama quarterback Jalen Milroe and Texas QB Quinn Ewers left a strong impression on the Las Vegas Raiders. League sources say the team was particularly impressed when breaking down film and discussing X's and O's with both players. That being said, Tafur and Reed also reported that the Raiders' sixth overall pick is likely too high for either of them. Milroe is currently ranked 77th overall, meaning he could be available in the third or fourth round, right in the range where the Raiders might look for a developmental quarterback. This could get interesting as the draft approaches. Quinn Ewers is currently ranked all the way down at 100, while Jackson Dart is projected as a second-round pick. But I wouldn't be surprised if both Jalen Milroe and Will Howard climb into the late second round in the coming weeks. Speaking of Will Howard, he made an interesting comment at the NFL Combine. He'd love the chance to play for Chip Kelly again. Kelly, now the new offensive coordinator in Las Vegas, has a strong track record. During his time as head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, he led 2 top-5 offenses. That kind of system could be a great fit for a young quarterback. Howard had a rough start to the season, but he's been steadily gaining momentum and is now entering the conversation as the third best quarterback in this draft class. He also stepped up when it mattered most, playing his best football in the college football playoff and helping his team win a national championship. So now, I want to hear from you. Who do you think the Raiders should target in free agency or the draft? Should they go after a veteran, draft a young quarterback, or maybe both? Drop your thoughts below. Now, let's get into some Raiders news. This one isn't a huge surprise. Brock Bowers just had an incredible season for a rookie tight end, or really, for any tight end. He racked up 1,200 yards and 5 total touchdowns, which is an insane level of production for the position. Because of that, Michael Mayer, the tight end the Raiders drafted 2 years ago, is now on the chopping block. According to The Athletic's Vic Tafur and Tashin Reed, multiple teams have reached out to the Raiders about Mayer, and trade discussions are happening. Mayer had an incredible college career at Notre Dame, 180 catches, over 2,000 yards, and 18 touchdowns in just 3 seasons. He was a dominant force, and as a Notre Dame fan myself, I can say he was a beast on the field. That's why the Raiders took him early in the second round, 35th overall, just 2 years ago. In his rookie season, playing in the messy Jimmy Garoppolo-Josh McDaniels era, Mayer put up 27 catches for 304 yards and 2 touchdowns. Not eye-popping numbers, but given the struggles at quarterback, it's understandable. The hope was that with better QB play, he'd have a chance to shine. Now the question is, will the Raiders actually move on from Mayer? It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. At pick number 13 in last year's draft, the Raiders got incredibly lucky. Brock Bowers was still available, and they wasted no time selecting him. He went on to have an absolutely insane season. Meanwhile, Michael Mayer struggled. He finished with just 21 catches for 106 yards and no touchdowns. To make matters worse, he missed 6 games in the middle of the season due to personal reasons. By the time he returned, he never really found his place in the offense. That being said, Mayer is still just 23 years old and remains under contract at a very low price for the next 2 seasons. That's why multiple teams, both contenders and rebuilding squads, are reportedly showing interest in him as a potential buy low candidate. Looking ahead, we're still about 2 months away from the NFL draft, but the more I dive into it, the more I'm becoming a fan of Will Howard and especially Jalen Milroe. Milroe is an electric playmaker. He ran for 20 touchdowns last season at Alabama. That kind of dynamic ability is exactly what I'd love to see in a Raiders quarterback for the future. That's it from me. Now, I want to hear from you. Who do you want the Raiders to target at quarterback? Drop your thoughts below.